Hey folks, so today we're going to walk through a couple demos of how to use Illustrator and working through Illustrator and things like that. We're doing this for our Vaporwave assignment, but if you're using Illustrator for another thing, it might still give you some helpful tips, so that's what I'm hoping for. Vaporwave, as a reminder, usually has this kind of grid texture that we're seeing in this image up here. The grid texture is, it's based on a perspective view, but we are not actually going to see that vanishing point. So like when you are going to actually make your vaporwave, you won't have like a vanishing point that you're trying to lead all to. So you're just going to have to kind of like guesstimate on that. So for instance, when we think of, usually things in perspective, they all lead into like one point. Here we've got this center line. And the center line would continue that vanishing point to about here on the sun. And then all of the other lines would actually be going towards that point. But again, you don't see them all meeting that point because of that's where the end of the horizon is there. Okay, cool. Keep that in mind. Now we're going to jump over to Illustrator. So here is kind of like a rough setup of like in general how we're going to do this. I'm going to do this demo on the other sheet so you can see how I did this. To first get us started, I'm going to click the show rulers. This is just going to kind of help give me a gauge of like where everything is fitting on my screen. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is hit show grid. Now there is a grid in Illustrator, and if this is distracting to you, then feel free to take it off. I usually just like to use a grid when I'm doing this sort of thing so I can kind of keep in line like how far over I'm moving everything and see the angles that I'm making for myself. Yes. Yeah. So that's how you guys get started. And the next thing that you're going to do, we're just going to put a black shape over this. So I'm going to show you the first tool now. Right over here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down is the shape tool. Now, if yours is not showing where the shape tool is, then you may consider going up to this top area up here. Yours may look like a panel up there, but it's going to be in the same general area. And then I'm just on the painting layout right now. So workspaces, different people use different workspaces for different kinds of project. For me, I feel like the painting one is definitely going to be the best for this situation. So I'm in the painting workspace, and that's how I can see all of these different options. Again, going to use the shape tool. I'm going to use the rectangle tool for this one here. So I need to be on the right layer. If you can see, it has like a little circle with an X through it. That means that I'm on the wrong layer. So I just need to go down to that first layer down here. And I'm going to draw just a regular rectangle. You can see the little pink line is giving me a guide to let me know where I'm covering and things like that. And like that I've made like a perfect square. So I don't want it to be red just for contrast purposes. I am going to choose a new color. Usually it'll have this color box up here. My settings are a little bit different on my laptop than they are usually in class. So I am going to stick with just the base color, just a base black, just to start us off. So now that I've got that background changed, I'm going to make a new layer. So you can see for my layer number 2, when I made this first grid, I have it on a separate layer than the other black square that I made. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. So I'm going to make a new layer. New layers are going to be in the bottom right-hand corner, same as Photoshop. So creating a new layer, and I'm just going to name this layer so I don't forget. This is going to be grid 2. And the next thing that I'm going to do is use this shape tool again. Since I'm in a separate layer, I'm no longer going to be interacting with this square that I just put over top of it. So remember, layers in Illustrator are more like file folders. They hold individual shapes. So there's only one shape there's two. There's two shapes in that layer number 1, but now that I'm in a separate file folder, it's a whole new, like I can put as many shapes in there that don't interact with the other things. So I'm going to start this one off the same way. Before I get started, I am going to change it to magenta. So Ooh, I'm still on the wrong layer. Hold on. Change this one back to black. Go to a new layer. Draw a rectangle. Change the rectangle color to magenta so I can see what I'm working with. Okay, I actually don't want to have the fill of this one, so I wanted to show these two different options here. The one farthest to the left-hand side on the screen, that is the fill color. The one on the right side of that, that's going to be the stroke or the outline of that shape. So we're just going to change that color to magenta, and then we're going to change that fill color to none. So you see here, if it is a white square with a red cross through it, that means none. 1 point as a border is a little bit on the smaller side, so I'm just going to bump mine up. So this is just giving us like a point of reference for our, like what we're looking at on our current screen. Remember, this is a vector-based program, so it's just for reference of what we're looking at when it's talking about points. And now the next thing I'm going to do is use a new tool. So that new tool is just going to be up at the very, very top, the selection tool. You'll notice that there are two different kinds of selection tool. I am going to use this black one here because I'm looking to move the entire shape. So I had picked up the tool and I moved it to the bottom corner. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to want to grab these corners and pull them out. So I'm going to be resizing this shape that I just made. To do that, I'm going to use this curvature tool. You can also use this direct selection tool, which will allow you to click on just the individual corners. When I use this curvature tool, it is a type of pin tool, so it has the habit of wanting to turn things into a different angle or shape. For now, I just want it to be a rectangle, so I'm not going to be accessing those features for this part here. When I go to drag or resize this thing, I am just going to hold down as I click on each of the points. And then try to get them around center. This is where that grid comes in handy, so you can try to like line it up to one of those grid lines. Right about there. If I need to zoom in, I can too. Okay. And then I want to do the same thing with this bottom part. Groovy. So now I have that first central box that kind of goes all the way around the page. The next thing I'm going to be doing is entering in new parts to get to the grid. Now, as you saw, it didn't give me any kind of major guidelines to snap to in order to understand the perspective that I'm going for. So it is kind of a little bit of just working through trying to finesse your grid. For instance, I can tell right now that I need to go back and change these here to be a little bit more equally spread apart. So that's a thing that I would want to spend some time doing. But just to get a basic idea of how this goes, we're going to do that in this one over here. So again, starting off with a shape tool, and I'm going to stretch it pretty far out this time over top of those pieces. Switching back to my curvature tool, and just dragging those pieces to the corner each time. Okay, and I'm going to do this for all of my parts that I do. So I'm silently going to do that just the same way. I am going to want everything to be at an angle. So that's the goal for this part. Almost there. Okay, so I probably only need about like one more box. And then I can go back and change those lines as I need. So yeah, I usually spend like a little bit of time just trying to clean up those lines. You'll do that with whatever function you use to make a grid. But after you get to this very last part and you only need a line through the middle, here is the next thing that you really need to know about Illustrator. Illustrator, as I said, it organizes shapes in folders. So it wants closed shapes. It does not like free lines. So, whenever you do need just a line and not like a shape, we have to use the line tool, or else it gets like irritated and is constantly trying to connect that free line to something else. The line tool is going to be under the shapes. So, I just clicked on this, and then if you click and hold, it should allow you to open up those other options. So going to use that line tool to just draw a line down the center. And then I'm also going to be using that line tool to do the lines that go horizontally across. Whenever we're doing these, we're just going to want to make sure that the ones that are further in the back are going to be closer together. So think about perspective, like the further back it is, the closer things are usually. And then it will gradually stretch out to be a little bit wider. Again, this is a thing that you can continually kind of clean up and stretch and do what you need to do until you're happy with where you've got it. But in general, this does teach you a couple of key tools that you'll need to be successful in Illustrator. So hopefully you found this demo useful. The next thing that I'm going to show you is going to be in a separate video. So please make sure that you have access to all of them as you are watching. Thank you guys.